Drew really never recovered mentally after that night. His father was killed right before his very eyes, and the girl he loved was kidnapped by two horrible men. Drew was in the hospital for a while, and the doctors were happy that he lived because he had lost so much blood. But he came home with a long scar across his stomach. Drew didn't talk for a few days and started to go into weeks, and as twice as hard as Abby was when he was silent. Kylie never showed up in school again, and neither did Alan. For the people who didn't know what really happened, they assumed that Kylie and Alan had vanished off in the face of the earth, but they were wrong. Kylie Paris was the only girl Drew ever loved when he was young, and she was the only one to ever be his friend. The beats finally stopped once Alan was gone, but sometimes he wished he was back to hurt him so Kylie could come to his rescue. Abby and Drew had buried Greg in the back of their beautiful field near the pond. Greg had always loved the pond and would take Abby down there for walks before they were married. I didn't seem to look at Abby had changed physically, but in her mind she meant dead mentally from the upset deaths that occurred very fast. Sometimes at night Abby would be alone in her bed and would dream about when she was with Greg before he died. The dreams she would have were very sad because sometimes at night she could almost hear his voice calling from the field and down towards the lake, calling her name and telling Abby how much he loved her and her son. Abby would be crying and hope that his death was just a dream, but she knew that she would never wake up from the nightmare she once lived. Draken had survived Father's Day and started off by sleeping in because he and Shigo were up late listening to his past, and he did some lab work, and Shigo and Abby spent some time out of the house and let him be himself, and that was the way he liked it on rough days. Shigo was getting more excited about the baby. Since every week passed and her stomach felt a tiny bit bigger and bigger, she had to buy all new clothes and put her old green and black jumpsuit away, which made her sad because sometimes Shigo felt like it was her skin taking it off hurt her. Dee and Amy and Monkey Fist would call every now and then just to see how they were doing and to see how Shigo's baby was coming along. It wasn't surprising that one day Amy called and needed to talk to Shigo. "Hello?" Shigo asked, picking up the receiver. "Hey Shigo, it's Amy. Hi. How are you? Shigo asked, getting herself some water and sitting down on the sofa. "I've been alright. How have you been?" "Fine. Draken is trying to find another solution to take over the world, but you know nothing ever works. It just keeps him occupied," Shigo said, taking a sip of her water. Amy laughed. "How have you been?" Shigo asked. "Monty and I have been good, and Toby is a handful. He insists that his father teaches him monkey kung fu, but you know, he's just like his daddy," Amy said, and Shigo laughed. "Hey, I was calling to tell you something. It's funny you're the only person I can talk to." "What's wrong?" Shigo asked, getting a little bit concerned. "Don't call me crazy, but I've been having the strangest dreams," Amy said, scratching her head. "You have?" Shigo asked, having her full attention. "Yeah, it's so weird. They start off that when I wake out of bed in the middle of the night and someone was calling me and I'm alone in the lair, and I go downstairs and it's so scary because I keep seeing this girl with blonde hair," Amy said. Shigo's face had gone white and she dropped the glass of water poured out from all over the red rug. She was frozen and couldn't believe what she was hearing on the other line. "So I go over to this little girl and I don't know, maybe she's like 5'5" or something, and she has golden blonde hair and is soaking wet. She is sitting in front of her fire and she's muttering words I can't hear them. But as I walk over, she has cuts on her wrists and sitting on the pool of crimson blood. Oh, it's horrible, and it smells too. But the scary thing is, when I reach her, she lifts up her head, as she isn't calling my name anymore. She's calling the name Shigo." Shigo then almost fainted. She couldn't believe it. Amy, her friend, was having the same horrible, frightening dream as her. How could Amy even know that Shigo was dreaming the exact same thing? And even worse, Shigo was feeling like those dreams were soon to come real, or this girl in the dreams is warning her. And what if Dementor was really coming back? "Shigo!" Dee and Amy then screamed on the phone, said she was calling out her name several times and didn't answer. "Oh, sorry. When did these dreams start?" Shigo then asked, shivering. "Well, let's see. I'd say I may have 3 to 4 of these strange dreams, and I have them over a week. Amy? She choked. Yeah? I've been having the same dreams. Dee and Amy was speechless for a few moments until they both broke the silence. When did you start having these dreams? Like, I don't know, maybe a few months ago, and I haven't had one in a long time, which is good. I don't know what's going on, Shigo said, sitting down. Neither do I. What if it's a sign? Amy urged. Shigo lightly laughed. I don't know about that, but it's really strange, and I haven't told Draken about them either. Do you think I should? Shigo asked. Well, if you feel like you need to talk to him, you go ahead, but I don't want you to be stressed. It might hurt the baby if you keep stressing, Amy said in a worried voice. Yeah, Shigo said, remembering the baby. You're right. You know, I sense that we haven't talked in a while. A little while ago, my brother died and we... Oh, Shigo, I'm so sorry, Amy said sadly but shocked. It's all right. I have learned to deal with it, Shigo said, remembering Wigo 1 and picturing him in her head. As I was saying before he passed away, Draken found a scroll in his office in the wall. We took it to my brother's and they couldn't find anything. Oh great, I forgot it, Shigo then said, annoyed, and remembered they took it home, never took it back with them. Oh, what did the scroll say on it? I'm not sure, it's a weird thought though, and like it was made up language or something. But so many odd things have been happening. I tried to find the history behind this lair, but I searched the net and nothing has come up. But even when I called the agent who sold us this lair to us, he didn't know what we were talking about it either, Shigo said. Wow, Dee and Amy said. Call me crazy, but have you ever used the Ouija board, Shigo? Not really. Why are you asking? Well, Mabe, do you think your lair is haunted? Amy asked. Yes? Well, no. Oh, I don't know, Shigo said, frustrated. Don't get upset. Everything will be fine. The reason why I'm asking is because maybe we can hold a sense to see what's really going on in our dreams, Amy said excitedly. A sense. Sense. When you do make a sense, just let me know, Shigo said, getting up and looking at the side because she was getting bored with the conversation. And I am making sense. Now listen, my cousin Angelica had a sense with her friends when she was young, and she believed a ghost was haunting her house. And she found out that someone was, and Angelica helped her, and she was never haunted again, Amy said cheerfully. Uh-huh. And how do you know you're not making this up? Shigo asked, raising an eyebrow. I'm not lying. I swear I'm not. Fine, Shigo said, letting out a deep, long breath, because she was tired. So will you do it? Yes, I'll do it, Shigo grunted. Okay, Shigo, you rock. Now when should I come over? Dee and Amy said, inviting herself. Shigo laughed and smiled because she was looking forward to this little gather. Want to come over tonight? Shigo asked. Yeah, that's fine. Even better, why don't you, Toby, and Monty all come for dinner while the men are having beer or whatever? We can have a so-called sense upstairs in the bedroom where I keep seeing her. Great, I hope you and Draken don't mind. Oh, we don't mind at all. Later on, Shigo was telling Draken. What? Draken said, pacing back and forth in his lab. A sense would be loads of fun. I mean, me and Amy are probably the only ones doing that. I don't care about that. Wait a minute. Have you been having more of those horrible nightmares? Draken asked, giving her a look. And now you say Dee and Amy's having them too? Shigo just shook her head and folded her arms. Why didn't you tell me if you were scared? Draken asked, worried and coming over and hugging her. Well, I didn't think it was a problem, but it's just so weird. What is weird? That Dee and Amy's been having the same dreams, and the girl then calls my name, and then she wakes up. Draken hadn't heard that part of the story and was more frightened. Wow, Shigo, I didn't know. I'm sorry, Draken said, and she felt like she was giving off a strange vibrate. Why are you sorry? You're not the ones having the dreams, Shigo said, breaking his hug and sitting down once she was bored. Ugh, there's nothing to do around here, she whined, throwing her head back. What time are they coming? Monkey Fist and Dee and Amy, I mean, Draken said, not listening to Shigo. I think around 6 or something. Why? Oh, just wondering, Draken said, rolling his eyes when she didn't look. Don't get snippy with me, mister, Shigo growled as she started to file her nails. I'm not getting snippy with you, Shigo. Draken said, growling back. Shigo and Draken hadn't had an argument for months, and they were both starting to get under each other's skin a little bit. You know, Draken, just because you and Dee and Amy had a little thing for each other, doesn't mean every time you have to see her, you don't have to get all upset about it, Shigo said. Draken was looking under the microscope, and he cut his finger in pain and glared at her. Excuse me? You heard me, she snapped back. Since when did I ever get upset about seeing Dee and Amy after she blew me off? Draken said, walking over and goosing up his sore hand. Since like now, Shigo said, trying to find a way to get back at him. Like you fight with me, don't you? Draken said, raising one eyebrow. Pretty much, Shigo said, smiling and laughing. Draken rolled his eyes and smiled back, because he knew that she was just playing around with him. But do you think I get upset when I'm around Amy? Draken asked as he came and sit next to her. Sometimes. Okay, maybe I'm just exaggerating. Shigo giggled nervously. Draken could see through her. What's bothering you, Shigo? Draken said, looking deep into her green eyes. I just get jealous, okay? I'm sorry, Shigo then said. She buried her head in her palms and started to cry. Oh, Shigo, don't ever wish that thing. Trust me, I am not in love with her. And besides, I love you with all my heart. That's why I married you and we started a family together, Draken said as he wrapped his strong arms around her as she cried in his chest, and he rocked her back and forth. I don't know what's wrong with me. I don't feel like myself. Sometimes I want to hurt you so badly, and other times I just want me in your arms to be with you always, Shigo choked. Draken then held Shigo more closely. Shigo, darling, it's your hormones, and you're having a baby, so you might feel happy one moment, very sad and depressed the next. Just remember that one thing, Draken said, taking her crying face in his sweet hands and wiping the tears from her eyes. I will always love you and keep you in my heart and never be mad at you. Never. I promise. And at this, Shigo leaned up and kissed him romantically on the lips and held him close to her body as he did the same. Finally, dinner had came around, and Abby had got a call from one of her friends earlier that she hadn't spoken to in a long time, that they went out to dinner, leaving Draken and Shigo alone with guests. Shigo didn't even want to wear a nice long black skirt with a blue tank top and her hair pulled back. Draken wore a sweater and a dark colored jeans. He was surprised because he didn't even know he owned a pair, since he would always wear his blue lab coat all day long. Finally, around 6 o'clock, Monkey Fist and Dee and Amy and their son Toby arrived at Draken and Shigo's lair. Amy was wearing a pink top and very dark red skirt. Monkey Fist wore a nice suit, and Toby wore the same thing, and his messy hair slicked back a little, like a little noble Englishman. Just like his dad. Hi, Shigo said, opening the door and welcoming them in. Hi guys, Draken said, walking into the room and greeted everyone. How are you all doing? Amy asked, as Toby tugged on his mother's arm. Mommy! What is it? Said Amy, looking down at the winning child. I'm hungry, and you said you could have as much food when I get here, he cried. Monty and Draken giggled, and Shigo wore a smirk. Honey, we'll talk about it later when Mommy's not repeating said things, okay? Dee and Amy said, giving him a look. You guys must have a long trip. I have dinner ready now, actually, Shigo said. She took everyone to the dining room. Draken pushed Amy in, and Amy pushed her son in and herself, and looked at Monty as she twiddled her fingers for the food. Oh, sorry, dear, he said, jumping up and pushing her in more. What's for dinner? Toby asked, licking his lips hungrily. We're having salmon. Do you like salmon? Shigo asked, as she was going to serve him some. Toby made a disgusting face and backed away from his chair. Ugh! Salmon is nasty! Toby! Both his parents said, glaring at him. Draken giggled a little bit, and Shigo just smiled. I'm sorry, Mom and Dad, Toby said, shyly looking down. You really would have to work on your manners, young man, Monkey Fist said, thanking Shigo, and she gave him some fish. Toby then sighed and rolled his eyes. Miss Draken, may I please have some fish? Toby asked, putting on a fake smile. Shigo then smiled at Draken and did the same, as they both burst out laughing. Yes, you can, Toby. Why don't you just call me Shigo? She said, still laughing. because no one had ever called her Miss Draken in her life, and she and Draken both found it hilarious, and they had a nice meal in the adults as Toby tried to eat his dinner with his toes, and not his silverware, but his mother scolded him. "So, did you hear the good news?" Monkey Fist said, holding Amy's hand as they both smiled. "Oh no, what's the good news?" Draken asked. "Well, we're going to have another baby," Amy said joyfully. Shigo and Draken were first a bit shocked at first, but then showed their happiness. "Oh, congratulations, you guys!" Shigo exclaimed happily. "That's great, Mont," Draken said, winking at him. "Yeah," Toby said, breaking the silence. "Mom and Dad have been very busy lately, especially at night." "Tobias Ryan Fisk, you have reached the limit, young man. When you get home, there will be no TV tonight," Monkey Fist then said, blushing as he was being serious. Draken then looked down, and so did Shigo, and they all grunted with laughter. "Fine," Toby breathed, pouting and shoving his mouth like a roll. Amy put her head on her hands and felt so embarrassed. "What a mom, I can't help to tell them. I mean, you and Dad are always doing that, nasty things like that every night." "That's it," Monkey Fist screamed, as he jumped and took Toby by the hand and walked him to the living room. Draken and Shigo, who just sat there stunned as they watched Amy blush like crazy. "We don't do it every night, but it's a crime for a married couple to just have some alone time," Abby said, blushing more. "Don't worry, we believe you," Shigo then said in a comforting voice. "It's natural, well, you know," Draken said. "Why does he have to be just like his father?" Amy thought, as he sludged back in her chair. "Daddy, why can't we stay in the other room with Mommy and nice people?" Toby asked as he sat down on the couch next to the fireplace. "Toby," Monkey Fist started to say, "sometimes people like to keep those kind of things to themselves and don't really want anyone else to know," Monkey Fist said. "Okay," Toby said, confused. Monkey Fist sighed and smiled, holding his son's little hand. "I will tell you everything you need to know when you're older, okay? But for now, don't say stuff like that in front of friends. It might make them uncomfortable," his dad said, winking at him, as Toby smiled and hugged his dad, who hugged him back. "But Dad, is that the thing you do with Mom?" Toby asked, as they started to head back to the others. "I'll tell you in a few years," Monkey said, being a good father. "Okay," Toby said joyfully, as he skipped back down to the room. "Oh, you're back," Amy said. "Don't worry, we had a talk," Monty said, kissing the top of Amy's head lightly. "Well, did everyone have a nice dinner?" Draken asked. "Yes, it was wonderful, thank you," Dan, Amy, and Monkey Fist explained. "Good, I'm glad you and all enjoy it. Toby, did you like it?" Shigo asked, looking at him. "Yeah, Shigo, it was tasty, thank you." Toby smiled, and then at his parents, and Monkey Fist winked at him. Shigo then cleared up the dishes, and Draken helped pour in the men some tea. They all talked a little while Toby was getting bored, and asked if he could go look around. They had told him yes, but to be careful, as there were some things like the shrink ray and other things he could get himself hurt on. Toby decided to go to the long hallway, to which it was rather dark, but then when he gets scared and decided not to, he slowly decided to walk up the carpeted stairs, and they were very close to the long dark hallway. He heard his name being called, and he froze on one step and looked down the hall. "Toby," called the voice. It was very distant, and it sounded like an angel. "Come to me," quietly the voice said. Then Toby's face went white as he started to walk out down the stairs, as if he were in a trance, and started to walk down the forbidden hallway. The air was old and very cold. It was like someone died around here. "Good boy," the mysterious voice said. A small but frightened and curious boy walked down the hall. He then came to the door to his right, and Toby slowly touched a handle and let the door slide open. "Toby, come in," called the voice, as it started to laugh in the distance. Toby's feet started to walk into the room, and the door slammed shut behind him. "So I didn't tell you the last time, dear, not to put your feet on the table?" Amy exclaimed, annoyed, as she pushed his feet off the table, and he rolled his eyes. "Well, it's very exciting that you both are going to have another child. We're very happy for you," Draken said, smiling at them both. "Since you have a boy now, do you want a little girl next?" Shigo asked, sipping her tea, which was still hot. "A little girl would be nice," Monkey Fist said, pouring himself a third cup of tea. "What about you?" Amy asked. "Well," Draken and Shigo said, looking at each other, I think we're going to have a little girl, Shigo said joyfully, rubbing her lower stomach. But who knows, we might even have a boy, Draken said, laughing nervously. Why don't want a baby girl? Shigo asked, doing Kim's puppy dog pout. Draken didn't take it anymore. Okay, maybe we'll have a girl, he said, smiling. Shigo smiled evilly, because she knew she was going to get her way with Draken. They talked a little longer until Amy checked her watch and asked Shigo if they wanted to start the scenes, and she agreed. Toby stood there like a dead board in the cold room and felt a shiver run down his spine. He felt a broke trance from shook his head and let out a small peep and walked back and quickly hit himself against the door. Where am I? He thought. As his little hands found the door handle, he turned it fiercely. Let me out, he cried. Don't be afraid, said a voice that was kind and gentle. Toby then froze and his eyes looked around in the darkness. Who's there? He asked nervously. I won't hurt you. Just come into the closet, please, spoke a voice as Toby turned around and he could make out a lining of the closet door. Gulping nervously, he slowly walked over to it and opened the door. Toby walked all the way in and he heard the closet door close behind him and lock. He then started to scream and pound his little fists on the door as he felt someone grabbed him from behind and start to scratch him all over his body. Mom! Dad! Help! He screamed as he started to cry. His helpless body was being controlled what felt like a monster. Toby felt long, sharp fingernails driven into his arms and legs, and he cried in pain. Some of his clothes were being ripped. Then he felt someone's hand with the long, sharp fingernails scrape across his face. Little helpless Toby couldn't take it anymore. His body what felt like it was bruised in horrid ways, and he had cut it open his body. He was laid down upon the floor. After what looked like a lifetime, Toby slowly opened his eyes and squealed, remembering what had happened, and he howled in pain as he tried to look at his cut-up body. He slowly managed to get up on his feet and hurried to the door and opened it. He hurried out of the room before he left and stopped dead in his tracks, and his eyes locked upon the mirror. Standing behind him stood a girl who was crying, but she was bruised in horrible ways. Just like Toby, she had blonde hair. Slowly brought her head up when she looked at Toby, straight in the eye, and he screamed in horror as she waved him mouthing words. Bye-bye. Shigo took everyone else's cups away, and they all settled in the living room in a circle. Amy brought out an Ouija board, and Draken was rather amused by it. So what does it do? He asked, looking at the numbers and letters written on it. Well, it can help you contact spirits, and if you're lucky, you'll get a sign, Monkey Fist said as he sat in his teepee style like the rest. Now we must. Amy's voice trailed off, and then she saw her son standing in the doorway. Oh my God, Toby! She cried, getting up and rushing over to him. Toby stood there with his hair all ruffled, and his face had deep cuts upon it that were oozing with blood and horrible black and blue marks on his neck. Son! Monkey Fist cried, running to his side. Toby's little suit now looked like it had been torn through a shredder, and he had a sick, twisted upon his face look. Draken and Shigo were horrified, and they hurried to his side. What has happened to you? Amy screamed as he held her son in her eyes. Oh my God! Shigo gasped as she examined the boy. Draken wanted to be sick, because he hadn't seen such a horrid sight on a child. Mom, I'm okay, Toby said, hugging her back. Okay? Oh, you have to go home? You've been abused. Toby, who did this to you? Amy said. Toby then pushed away and smiled at everyone. The girl from my dreams, Toby spoke. And with that, Dan, Amy, and Shigo were so shocked it would have to be a miracle to get them out of it. Shigo and Dan and Amy stood there completely frozen, and Amy was about to faint, but Shigo did first. Shigo! Draken cried, as he hurried over to her limp body and held her in his arms. He started to blow some air over her face and his hands, and Toby just stood there, keeping his eyes locked upon her. Monkey Fist ran into the other room and got a cool washcloth and gave it to Draken, who wiped her face gently. Oh my gosh, I hope she's okay, Dan Amy said nervously, walking over and holding Toby. She'll be fine, Toby whispered, as Amy looked down and wiped his cuts sadly and examined his body. Listen to me, Toby. What happened to you? Amy asked. shaking him slightly, all because she was frightened. Amy, let him be, Monkey Fist said gently. No, Toby, tell me what happened to you. Tell me, she screamed. Amy, Monkey Fist said, as he came over and held Amy in his arms as she started to cry. Toby just walked over to the couch and sat there motionless, gazing into the burning fire. Monkey Fist was cooing Amy and was in a total panic, and Shiga was starting to wake up in Draken's loving arms. He sat in the corner and patted her face gently with the cloth. After a moment or two, her two eyes started to flutter, and Draken was very excited. Oh, Shigo! Thank God you're all right, he said joyfully, stroking her face gently. Prue? Shigo moaned as she slowly looked around the room, and smiled when she saw Draken. Hey, she whispered. Hey, he whispered back, smiling at her. Dan Amy had wiped the tears from her eyes and looked over and saw Shigo was all right. Shigo managed to get back on her feet with Draken's support, and she sat down on the couch and smiled at everyone. What a night, Draken thought, as he sat next to her and put his arms around her and kept her close. No one didn't know what to say. Amy was still sniffling and keeping her eyes on her son. The weird thing was, he wasn't himself. He hadn't been himself since he went off to explore. His body looked like a killer got a hold of him. But even though he was bleeding horribly, he refused to wear any bandages. But nothing seemed to be hurting him. The clock then stroked 9 o'clock as everyone jumped and Shigo grabbed a hold of Draken's shirt and buried her head in his chest because she was scared. Draken smiled and held her, rubbed her back, and comforted her. Well, Monkey Fist started to say, I know this has been a very strange night, but thank you once again for having us over. We're very grateful, he said, smiling and started to get up along with Amy when someone stopped them. She doesn't want anyone to leave. It was Toby who interrupted his father. Everyone was frozen, and there had been eyes locked on him as well. Who doesn't want us to leave? Shigo asked. Toby's head slowly turned to Shigo, and they saw each other. Shigo shivered in fear and held on to Draken more closely. She wants to show you something, Shigo, Toby said, slowly sliding off the sofa and crawling to the door, leaving a trail of brown blood stains behind him. Shigo couldn't help but keep her eyes off of Toby, and before she knew it, her mind was telling her to follow him. So she slowly got off the couch and sat down in front of him. What is she going to show me? Shigo asked curiously, looking down at the Ouija board on its pointer. Come with me, Toby then whispered, as the lights start to flicker and fire from behind them rage as he slowly reached out his right hand to Shigo. She gulped hard and leaned and flashed a look at the others who had no clue what was going on. Letting out a deep breath, Shigo then took her own hand and reached it out as well, and there the skin touched. Shigo's eyes bulged open in shock, and everything around her was white and spinning. She heard distant screams, and in the distance it was getting hard for her to breathe. Help! Shigo screamed as she held her head in her hands. It felt horribly nauseous and was starting to stop. Shigo then slowly opened her eyes. She realized she was sitting on her knees, looking around the place that she hadn't ever seen in her life, or so she thought. She realized everything around her was black and white. Where am I? She asked herself, looking around. Shigo had landed in the dungeon and the lair was ice cold. Looking around, she saw that there were some horrible scrapes on the walls, and chains were some dark red splatters on it. Oh my God, Shigo thought, as she managed to get up and walked around the door, which was dark brown. She reached for the handle and then someone stopped her. Don't open it, said a voice. Shigo still went still like a board and felt a cold, wet shiver run down her spine. Standing behind Shigo was a girl who had wet blonde hair, and her face was dead and thin. Her hands were then shown side to side, and she wore a dark brown rag. She didn't have any shoes on her feet. Who are you? Shigo asked, frightened as hell, as she turned and saw this girl. Someone who's going to help you stop this war, said the child, lifting her hand up and smiling at Shigo. Where am I? What do you want with me? Shigo said in a panicked voice. You are here because I've been calling you, but you don't seem to answer me, she growled. What? Shigo breathed. I want to show you something, the girl said, giving Shigo a toothy smile and started to walk over to her and reach her hand out, as if she was going to fall. Shiga was getting more and more frightened and stepped back some more and pressed her body against the door. "He's coming back, and it's time I show you some of the truth," she whispered as she came closer and touched Shigo's arm. And when she did, a large bright light shone through in the room and things started to spin. Then the spinning started to stop, and Shigo and the girl were standing up on their feet in the room. It was dark, and the little light shone through. Shigo suddenly felt sick and rested her hand on the wall, but when she did that, her hand went right through. What's wrong with me?" Shigo screamed as she looked at the girl. "Watch," the child instructed, as she pointed to the door, and Shigo gulped, afraid of what was to come through. Then she heard rough footsteps coming from the floor above her, and cries and yells as she got even scared, and then she heard rushing footsteps hunting down the stairs. The door flowed open as a man with horrid angry face walked in dragging a girl with blonde hair who was crying behind him. "Let me go!" she screamed. "Shut up!" he roared as she smacked her hard across the face. The man had dark brown reddish hair, and then he dragged the girl to the corner and threw her in the dust. She rubbed her eyes and crouched down as he cursed at her some more, and she whimpered as he came over. "Didn't I tell you to shut up, you piece of crap?" he roared, raising his hand above her head. She then screamed and covered her head in fear. "Now, since you have no one else in your life, you'll be my slave. You will be punished every morning and night. And don't you even think about crying, because your stupid father ruined everything," he screamed, some more picking her up by the throat, and she held on to his hands, and her face was turning blue. "Let me go! I can't breathe!" The girl choked as he dropped her, and then she coughed some more. "Now get in that room before I change my mind and decide I'll kill you now," he roared, kicking her in the rib cage, making her fall to her knees and breathe heavily. "Get up!" the man roared, and then he picked her up and threw her helpless body into the room as she hit the wall and lay motionless on the floor. Shigo then started to cry and scream as she walked over to the cruel man and smacked him across the face. But when she touched him, her hand went right through his body, and she gasped in horror and stepped back. The man opened the drawer and pulled out 2 shining knives and walked over to her room and locked the door with 2 chains and left her in the cold, wet dungeon. The room was starting to spin some more. Shigo and the blonde-haired girl were in the kitchen, where now 3 fat, ugly chefs were cooking disgusting-looking food. One man was stirring a large bowl of dark brown soup that was bubbling horribly. Another man then walked over and joined him next, stared at him with some poor rat poison into the calf's blood. Shigo felt as if she was going to be sick, until she saw the little boy walk in, and the man smiled and ruffled his joyful hair. They poured him a bowl and then he hurried off. Before Shigo knew that they were back in the dungeon, the boy walked into the room and saw the girl crying. "Don't worry, I brought you some food. This would make you feel better," he said, wearing an evil smile as he brought the bowl in front of her, and without hesitating, she grabbed it from his hands and gulped it down. Backing away and then dropped the bowl, her eyes went small. She was on her knees and then held her throat as she started to cry in pain. "What did you give me?" she screamed as she glared at him. "It's just my homemade soup. You shall be getting sick now," he instructed, as she choked really hard. Then a large gush of orange liquid and blood gushed out of her mouth. The girl was crying horribly as she started to throw up all over the floor. The young boy started to howl with laughter as he walked over, avoiding her throw up all over the floor, and smacked her with a stick, and she threw up more liquid. Shigo couldn't believe what she was seeing. Such torture! How could this happen? The girl sat next to her with sad eyes, then looked away at them, and Shigo turned around and screamed in horror as the boy lit a flame above her head and set her on fire. The girl then screamed in pain as the fire flew across her body, and she rolled around and was getting sick all over the floor. Then the boy cautiously ran out of the room and shut the steel door and ran up the stairs. Shigo was crying horribly, and then she through the door and watched the poor child being burned alive. "Help her!" she cried, as she stared at the girl who was not looking at the burning child. Shigo then ran over to her and grabbed her shoulders and yelled in horror, "Help her! What is wrong with her?" she cried. "I have already been through that pain before," she whispered, looking directly into Shigo's eyes. Then Shigo's mouth went totally dry. Shigo had realized that this girl was showing her her past, what really happened to this girl, and Shigo knew she had to find out what happened next and who did this to this poor child. But in the distance she could hear Draken's voice calling her, and she knew that she was leaving this past. Then in slow motion she looked back at the burning child, but it wasn't burning anymore. She was chained to the wall, and her skin was perfectly normal. She had horrible slashes across her body, and a whip had laid her by her feet. It was covered in blood. "I'll stop whoever did this to you," Shigo then whispered, as she held onto the child and cried on her dresser as she would, and started to spin again, because she knew she was going back. Shigo was on her knees and was crying horribly, and found out that she was crying in Draken's arms. She had slowly opened her eyes and looked around the fire, then looked around the room. "Draken?" she asked, and she hugged him close. "What happened? You were going into shock, but you didn't move. You were just walking, and then you tried to set yourself on fire," Draken cried as he held her more closely. "Fire? Fire?" Shigo almost screamed, remembering the girl who was set on fire. Toby was sitting in the small front of the fire and started to blink his eyes. Then his pupils were no longer small, and they were big and baby-like. "Mom!" he cried, and she looked around the room and saw everyone was frightened. "Toby, what happened?" Amy asked as she ran over to her, and she picked him up. I don't know. It felt like someone else was in my body," he said, looking at his daddy, who hugged them both tightly. "I think we should go home," Monkey Fist said, getting the coats, and Draken and Shigo nodded. After they left, Draken kept Shigo in his arms tightly, and started to breathe heavily, and pray that this night of terror was over. "Drew?" Shigo moaned, sitting up and breaking his hug. "Yes, I went back in time," Shigo started. "I saw someone's past. It was horrible. There was this girl, and she told me that she's been trying to reach me, and then she threw up, and it was this horrible boy and his father. Oh God, his father beat her," Shigo then started to say as she went into panic. Shigo, calm down, sweetheart, it's alright. I'm here." Draken had cooed her, and as he took her back in his arms and rocked her back and forth, then looked at the clock, and it read 10 o'clock. It wasn't late for them, but Draken and Shigo had a very long day, and they were tired. They knew they needed sleep. So Draken picked up Shigo from under his legs and carried her upstairs to the bedroom. "I love you, Drew," Shigo whispered as she held on to him and laid her gently on the bed. "I love you too, Shigo," Draken said kindly as he kissed her forehead, and she got under the covers and started to drift off to sleep. Draken went into the bathroom and brushed his teeth and got ready for bed, when he heard his mother came into the house and go upstairs to the bedroom and shut the door. Draken smiled and knew she had gotten home safely, and he got into bed and shut off the lights. That night he couldn't sleep. Draken was just kept thinking about what had seen and happened that day. Why was Toby so cut up? And who or why did he say it was the girl from his dreams? And why did Shigo act as if he was possessed? His brain started to hurt as he drifted off to sleep, and yet he had so many questions that he wanted to be answered, but he would have to wait a long time to find out the truth.
What's up, my pretties? It's the Lion Queen here. I want to appreciate you all for tuning into this video, and I do appreciate you guys supporting my video by giving this video likes and stuff. If you really enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like, comment and subscribe if you're new, ring the bell for notifications to when I upload, so that way you guys will get updated for whenever I upload. If you want to follow me on Twitter or DeviantArt, feel free to leave a follow on those if you are interested in following me on those socials. If you want to support my backup channel, known as Miss Dark Shigo, feel free to subscribe to it, as a link to that will also be in the About page section. And with that being said, and that being the case, thank you so much for watching, my pretties, and as always, stay pretty.